What if I told you a single bank account, hidden in a quiet European tax haven, just destroyed Meghan Markle's royal titles in one swift, ruthless decision from the monarchy? That's right. No dramatic press conference. No tearful goodbye. Just a sealed letter, a final ruling, and one gut-wrenching headline. Meghan Markle is no longer Her Royal Highness. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But how did it come to this? What secrets were buried so deep they required the personal intervention of both King Charles and Prince William? And how did this explosive information stay hidden until now? The truth is stranger than any palace rumor. Because this story isn't just about money. It's about betrayal, deception, control, and the burning question every royal insider is asking behind closed doors. Was Meghan Markle ever loyal to the crown, or was this her plan from the start? Let me take you inside the moment everything began to fall apart. But be warned, this isn't the version you'll see in the tabloids. It starts with a single morning, a chilling message, and ends with one woman's titles shattered beyond repair. Picture this. It was a clear Tuesday morning in Montecito. Meghan Markle, coffee in hand, was browsing headlines about herself again. Nothing new. A mix of praise and outrage, depending on which outlet she dared to read. She knew the game by now. But what she didn't know was that across the Atlantic, inside the stone walls of Clarence House, King Charles and Prince William had just concluded a private emergency meeting. No advisors, no press secretaries, no outside voices. Just the future and the present monarch, face to face. And in front of them, on polished oak, sat a leather-bound report. Thin, clean, deadly. It was from the Crown's private auditor, a man appointed not by the government, but by the Queen herself before she passed. A man whose job was simple: trace every pound connected to royal privileges. And what he found wasn't just financial misconduct. It was a deliberate act of concealment. Hidden funds, unreported transfers, and a secret account, allegedly tied to Meghan Markle, with deposits traced back to events that occurred while she was still officially a working royal. Now pause for a second. Ask yourself, what would you do if you found out someone close to your family had set up a financial fallback? While publicly crying victim, while accepting public funding, while demanding privacy and protection at the same time, would you confront them? Would you forgive them? Or would you act? Charles didn't flinch. William was colder than ever. The last few months had already tested them. Meghan's interviews, her Netflix deals, Harry's memoir, the constant shots at the monarchy. But this was calculated. This was a step too far. And so, while Meghan continued her routine in California, attending charity events, smiling for carefully curated photo ops, and speaking on podcasts about healing, the palace moved fast. First came the internal review, then the legal consultations, then the call to the Royal Titles Office, which had been dormant for decades, last activated during the Queen's internal investigation of Prince Andrew. And then, the letter was drafted. It was cold, formal, brutal in its simplicity. It informed Meghan that a vote had been passed by the Privy Council, one that would see her remaining royal titles revoked indefinitely, pending further legal review. It informed her that her access to royal archives, assets, and protections was being suspended. And it informed her that she was no longer recognized as a formal representative of the British royal family in any capacity. The letter was signed by King Charles and co-signed by Prince William. Now here's the twist. The palace didn't leak it. They didn't need to. They knew Meghan's inner circle would. Because at the exact moment that letter arrived in California, hand-delivered by a courier who refused to speak or make eye contact, another message was making its way through encrypted backchannels used by royal security. It contained 3 scanned pages. One showed the official letter, another showed the financial trail, and the third, an image of the secret account. It was titled simply, Emerald Duchess Trust. And that's when all hell broke loose. But this wasn't just about the headlines that followed. Not the screaming tabloids, not the furious tweets, not even the stunned silence from Harry, who reportedly found out minutes after Meghan opened the envelope. No, the real story was what came next. Because the account itself? It wasn't even the most damaging part. That would come later, when investigators discovered who else had access to it. When they realized this wasn't just a personal fund. It was part of something bigger. Something global. Something royal insiders had suspected for years, but never dared to say aloud. Meghan Markle wasn't just preparing for independence. She was allegedly building an empire, and she was using royal prestige to do it, right under their noses. But hold on. Before we go further, you have to understand why this matters now. Why King Charles moved when he did. Why William supported the decision, even when he knew it would sever what little family ties remained. Why the story didn't explode last year or the year before. Because there was one moment, one royal insider, that triggered everything. A single line in an intercepted message that confirmed the worst fear the monarchy had been sitting on. And that message? We'll get to it. But first, ask yourself, why would someone risk everything they fought for, titles, wealth, global recognition, to hide a bank account? Why would the monarchy choose this moment, of all times, to act? And what else did they find, buried in financial codes, hidden in encrypted files, whispered in legal corridors? Because what happened next wasn't a media frenzy. It was a takedown, a strategic removal of power, status, and image. And for Meghan Markle, it marked the end of her reign as a duchess and the beginning of a new war. But it wasn't just her name being erased. What investigators found inside that bank account had implications that reached all the way back to the Queen's final months and forward into Harry's inheritance, Archie's birth, and the one line in the Queen's will that no one understood until now. So stay with me, because the account, that was just the beginning. What came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What do you do when the very titles that made you famous are quietly ripped away and you don't even get a warning? Would you scream? Cry? Lawyer up? Or would you sit in stunned silence as your royal identity vanished like mist over Windsor? Let me take you there, step by step. It began on a Wednesday. Sunny skies in Montecito. The kind of day where the world feels untouched by scandal. Meghan Markle had just returned from a wellness retreat outside Santa Barbara, an invite-only weekend designed for high-frequency female entrepreneurs, as the brochure boasted. Everything felt calm, but calm always comes before the collapse. At exactly 9:42 a.m. Pacific time, her housekeeper opened the front gate to a courier dressed in a neutral gray suit. No name tag, no smile, just a leather envelope, sealed with a gold-embossed insignia of the British crown. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Within 5 minutes, that envelope sat in Meghan's hands. Still sealed. Still heavy. She wasn't expecting anything from the palace. Not a letter. Not a gift. Not even a passive-aggressive holiday card. That's what made it worse. Because the moment she ran her fingers across the wax emblem, she knew this wasn't formality. This was finality. Still, she waited. 2 minutes. 3. 5. She stared at it like it might open itself, like maybe it wasn't real. And then, with one swift motion, she cracked the seal. Her eyes scanned the first line, then the second. Then she stopped. They didn't even soften the language. They didn't say pending. They didn't say considering. They said, the titles are revoked. Just like that. No apology. No conversation. No explanation. The letter continued in a cold, mechanical rhythm. She was no longer permitted to use the title Duchess of Sussex in official engagements. She could no longer speak on behalf of, or as a representative of, the British Crown. She was stripped of privileges previously extended under the authority of Queen Elizabeth II. Effective immediately. But the most chilling sentence? It wasn't about her. It was about the children. A formal review of hereditary privileges assigned to Master Archie Harrison and Miss Lilibet Diana is underway and shall be concluded by the end of the fiscal quarter. Archie, Lilibet, they weren't just coming for her. They were coming for her legacy. Her hands trembled as she placed the letter down. She wasn't crying. Not yet. But her silence screamed through the walls of that Montecito mansion. The question hanging in the air was louder than anything. Why? What had triggered this? She grabbed her phone, dialed Harry, and let it ring. Voicemail. He was on a flight back from Tokyo. Something about a sustainability conference and a side meeting with an old college friend who'd gone into crypto. She texted, "Call me. Now. It's bad." She paced, walked in circles, picked up the letter, dropped it again, sat down, stood back up, and then her phone buzzed. Not a call. A notification. Encrypted. Private channel. From one of her former PR consultants based in London who still had contacts deep inside the palace. The message was brief. They found it. The account. Charles is furious. William is the one who pushed this through. 3 lines. No comfort. No warning. Just the truth. They found it. The account. The one she thought was invisible. The one hidden through layers of shell corporations, anonymous donors, and trust funds buried under 6 jurisdictions. She felt the blood drain from her face. Because now it made sense. The sudden frost in public royal statements. The delayed responses from charities. The whispers on social media about financial irregularities and offshore speculation. It wasn't just rumor. It was real. And someone close, had flipped. Someone leaked everything. And that meant more than titles. It meant exposure. See, for all her media savvy, Meghan knew one thing above all. Perception is protection. As long as she wore the royal veil, even loosely, she was untouchable. You couldn't mock her without backlash. You couldn't investigate her without sounding conspiratorial. You couldn't question her motives without being labeled dangerous. But now she was naked, stripped of royal armor. And worse, everyone was going to ask the same question. What exactly did they find in that account? That's when the second call came in. A private number. She answered on the 3rd ring. Meghan speaking. Silence. Then a breath. Meghan, it's Dominic. The voice was low, urgent. Dominic, her former financial advisor. The man who helped her restructure her lifestyle brand before the Netflix deal. The man who'd once been her firewall. Not anymore. You need to listen to me, he said quickly. They traced it through Geneva. The trust name was flagged by an old compliance officer who used to work with royal funds. He recognized the naming structure. Meghan swallowed hard. What else did they find? A pause. I don't know everything. But the report mentions overlapping dates. Money moved into the account right after the South Africa tour. They think it's linked to private engagements that weren't declared. That's impossible, she shot back. That trust wasn't even. It was. They connected it through 2 intermediaries. One of whom just testified under NDA. Her jaw tightened. Testified. That meant there was already an inquiry. An active one. Not speculation. Not whispers. Formal investigation. Can I fix this? She asked, her voice cracking slightly. A longer pause this time. Then, not unless you can erase history. And then he hung up. Just like that. The air around her changed. The silence in the house wasn't peaceful anymore. It was suffocating. She glanced back at the letter. Her name, stripped of its crown. It didn't even say Duchess Meghan. Just Rachel Meghan Markle. The name she thought she'd buried in 2018. That's when the tears came. Not loud. Not theatrical. Just slow, hot, bitter. The kind you cry when you realize a chapter isn't just ending. It's being ripped out of the book entirely. And as the minutes crawled by, she did something rare. She opened a drawer in her office, took out an old leather-bound notebook, and flipped to the page where she'd scribbled, years ago, "What power do I own that they can't take from me?" It was a self-affirmation from her acting days. But now, it felt like a question she couldn't answer, because they just took her titles. They might take the children's honors next, and depending on what else they uncover, they could take her legacy, too. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because while she sat in Montecito, holding that letter like a death certificate for her royal life, Prince William was holding a second letter. And this one? It wasn't for Meghan. It was for someone else. Someone even closer. And what it contained would crack open the next layer of this royal scandal. And drag another unexpected name into the spotlight. But that's a story for the next chapter. Because what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What if I told you that the entire royal machine, the age-old institution that runs on secrecy, symbolism, and centuries of control, was nearly brought to its knees by a 6-digit deposit from a bank no one had ever heard of? And what if I told you it all started with a single flag transaction? Not in London, not in Los Angeles, but in Zurich? Let's rewind. Long before that letter landed in Meghan Markle's hands, long before King Charles signed away her royal titles, something strange happened inside the vault-like interior of a boutique private bank in Switzerland. This was not a place the public could walk into. No, this was a place reserved for monarchs, oil barons, tech billionaires, and trust fund heirs with more offshore accounts than birthdays. It was a slow Tuesday morning when a young compliance officer, new to the firm, ambitious, and slightly overzealous, noticed something odd. A transfer of exactly £684,320, routed from a corporate holding account in Belize, was marked with an unusual code, ED 419. At first, it looked standard, a shell company routing money to a trust. But the recipient trust's name raised a red flag. Emerald Duchess Trust. It sounded elegant, sophisticated, royal even. Too royal. That compliance officer, let's call her Nadia, paused. She'd been trained to spot laundering patterns and name-based anomalies, especially those tied to high-risk clients. So she typed the name into a secure internal search tool and cross-referenced it against politically exposed persons' databases. And that's when it blinked.